Welcome to Art 101. I'm Mr. B, and this is Lesson 2. Throughout this series, we'll be learning the basics of drawing and painting. Each lesson will be a progressive building block to make you a better artist. We will start with the elements and principles of design, then move on to proportion and drawing from life. Once we have the basics of drawing down, we can then introduce color. We'll learn about color theory, harmonies, schemes, and a few tips that can be used with almost any medium. Let's get started. The elements and principles of design can be used with anything that you'd like to create. To keep them straight in your head, think of a cooking recipe. The elements are the ingredients that we use to make our artwork, and the principles are the instructions that we follow to make sure our art is the best it can be. Depending on who you talk to, there are anywhere from 6 to 12 different elements of design. But for the sake of simplicity, I've narrowed it down to my favorite 5. Line, shape, color, texture, and value. But by far, value is the most important. Before we dive into what each of these are, please understand that it is possible to go very in-depth with each principle and element of design, but that's not what we're doing here today. We'll just cover the basics. First, line is very simple. It's a thin shape that can either be soft or hard. Line can also be called edge. A soft line or edge means that the borders of it are not clearly defined, like a blurry or fuzzy picture. A hard line is the opposite, a line with a sharp, clearly defined boundary. A line also has weight. The weight of a line is just thick or thin. It's important for you to know all these terms because I will be using them a lot throughout the coming lessons. Now, our next element is shape, and there are 2 different kinds, mechanical and organic. Mechanical shapes usually have straight edges with definable angles like a square or star. It can also be a circle or an ellipse. When you think of mechanical, just think of machine because it usually takes some kind of tool to make a mechanical shape. An organic shape or form is usually irregular or asymmetrical. These shapes are associated with things from nature like plants and animals. Color. Okay. Color is crazy, and you can take entire semester-long college courses learning about color theory. Today, I'll just say that the color you choose is not important, but where you put that color changes everything. I'll be making a more in-depth video about color later in the series, so don't worry, we'll get there. Texture is a lot of fun, whether you're trying to render a texture so that cute little rabbit you're drawing actually feels soft and fluffy when you look at it, or if you're putting physical texture onto your painting. My only caution is that it's very easy to have too much texture, so be careful. Whew. Okay, now we're on to value. The value of a piece of art can convey emotion. The value of your shadows can add depth and contrast to your local colors. And the value of your highlights can make any piece really come alive. Without it, your art has no value. Get it? That's a pun. Okay, that covers the elements, or the ingredients of our design. Now for the principles, or the recipes that we follow. Again, I've chosen my favorite from a long list. Balance, contrast, repetition and variation kind of go hand in hand. Proportion and movement. So the first one is balance, and that refers to the visual weight of the subjects in a piece based on size and position. An object at the bottom has more visual weight than an object at the top. And if all the subjects are on one side, the balance of the piece is thrown off and it feels like something's missing. Along with balance, we have the rule of thirds, or the golden ratio. Basically, you put important features like your horizon line, subjects, and focal points in the guidelines and intersect points And for some reason, we automatically think that it looks better when you do that. The easy way is to divide into thirds, but the real golden ratio is 1.61803398875, meaning that it's not quite 33%, one third, but it's actually 30.9% if you want to be super technical about it. Contrast can refer to the difference between two values that are next to each other, or between the lightest and darkest values in a drawing. You can use high contrast to make a focal point, or low contrast to make an expressionism piece. Repetition and variation go hand in hand, because if you have too much of one, it starts messing things up. If you have too much repetition, the piece becomes boring. But if you have too much variation, the piece becomes chaotic and confusing. It's also possible to have too little repetition, causing an element of a painting to feel out of place. So just remember, if something feels out of place, add more of it. Proportion is the size relationship between different shapes in your art. The size of a hand compared to the feet, or the size of a tree compared to the deer standing next to it. Proportion is important to make your scene feel realistic. But if you don't care about realism, then whatever. Look at Mickey Mouse and his elephant hands. Movement helps you sell your art. You actually have the power to make people look where you want them to, and even make them go in circles so they look at your art longer and then buy it. If you have movement that leads off the image, that will just lead the viewer right off to the next piece in the gallery, and they'll buy somebody else's art instead. Now, that doesn't mean that if you don't care about selling your art, you don't need movement in your piece. Controlling movement helps the viewer look at what you want them to see. So that's art in a nutshell. We'll go more in depth about each of these in the coming lessons. I hope you learned a lot today, and we'll see you next week. Ciao for now, guys.